Welcome to How to Coach to Being a Better Teammate. Hi, I'm Tim Hagan, Chief Coaching Officer of Progress Coaching. Now, during this mini course, you're going to learn very specific coaching strategies and approaches that we actually teach in our full-blown Progress Coaching training system. Now, at any point during the course, if you have questions, write them down. We will give you our contact information at the end, and feel free to reach out to us. But during this course, you're going to learn very specific coaching strategies that are going to allow you to foster greater teamwork and position each and every employee to becoming a better teammate. Now, we're going to use something called group coaching. Group coaching is much different than a staff meeting. A staff meeting is where a manager directs, has an agenda, has items he or she wants to uncover or cover. But in group coaching, you're going to ask more questions. You're going to facilitate. You're not going to lead and direct as much as what you might in a staff meeting. And that's okay. That positions you to have a much more interactive dialogue and a much more robust, if anything, robust interaction with your staff. Now, if you're not a certified trainer or if you're not a trainer in general, that is awesome. This is going to serve you very, very well. This course is designed with the manager in mind, not the trainer. If you are not a trainer and you are nervous about using these strategies, don't be. I promise you, you will find them extremely easy to implement, but more importantly, very easy to execute. So the keys to leading a group coaching session are really simple in nature. Be prepared. Be yourself. Be ready to maneuver, and be flexible. Now, to a certain extent, there's a little bit of transparency, maybe even more vulnerability. I would even say a little bit more exposure because you can't control the outcome like you might in a management-driven meeting. You're going to ask questions. You're going to facilitate activities. You're going to position the staff to become a part of the solution. So when you're leading your group coaching session, there's a couple fundamental things that you can do. First, establish the challenge or the area of improvement. Number two, ask a rhetorical question. Let me give you an example. Today, everybody, we're going to get together and we're going to talk about teamwork. Wouldn't you all agree that we probably have a pretty easy opportunity to increase our teamwork and cooperation? I think we'd probably all be a little bit happier, right? That's the rhetorical question. So the idea is to establish the area, in this case, being a great teammate. Number two, and asking a rhetorical question. Wouldn't you all agree we have an opportunity to potentially become better teammates? And once you get agreement, what you're doing is you're creating an emotional attachment to the topic. Then when you create the activity, you can lead a discussion. You can ask them to create solutions. And if applicable, you can ask them to practice the solutions. So this is a rough framework of how you can lead group coaching sessions. Now, there are three strategies we're going to teach you: define and coach, whiteboard coaching, acknowledging communication strategies to being a great teammate. Each of these strategies are open to your interpretation, your adaptation. You can certainly make these activities your own. The first strategy is something called define and coach. Now, let me give you the history behind this strategy. Years ago, I was in a staff meeting with a series of salespeople, and the sales leader kept telling his team they have to show a sense of urgency. And I noticed something on everybody's faces. There were blank stares, blank looks. So I stopped the meeting and I asked everybody, what's your definition of a sense of urgency? Out of 23 people in the room, we had 16 pretty different definitions, meaning the manager could never, ever have been successful coaching to a sense of urgency because there wasn't a mutual understanding. And that's where this activity, this strategy came into play. So what you do is you get your team together and you ask people. You can ask them one-on-one, to share in a group setting. You can pair them up in groups of 2 or 3. It's totally up to you. But you ask them, what is the definition of a great teammate? You break them apart, you let them share, and then ultimately you ask them to share in front of the group and you write it up on a flip chart or a whiteboard. And what you do is you start to take the best parts of each group or each person's definition and you write out what is a mutually accepted definition. And then you ask everybody, do we agree this is the best definition? Once you have total agreement, you can itemize the actions that are required to support that definition. So once you get your definition, you gain agreement, you then ask your staff, what actions do we all need to take to specifically support that definition? That's the emotional attachment. That's the emotional commitment. It is one of the most highly effective strategies you can use because you don't leave things to interpretation. Now, once you have the actions itemized, now you have specific things that you can actually coach to. Number 2, one of my favorite strategies is whiteboard coaching. So what you do is you ask your team, and this is a great activity to do after the first strategy, but certainly months down the road. You ask the whole team, if someone were watching us right now, how would they currently describe our ability to be great teammates? So under number 1 on a whiteboard, you're going to hear the good and potentially the not so good. You then go to the right side of the board and you ask the question and write down the responses to, ideally, how do we want people to describe each and every one of us as teammates? Now, ideally type questions do what? Elicit only positive responses. Here's the cool part. You go to step number 3 and you write down the responses to the following question. What actions do we need to take to make sure the right side of the board, the ideal state, becomes our reality? What actions do we need to take to make sure the right side of the board becomes our reality? Now here is the strategy behind whiteboard coaching. Very few people like to change. So what's cool about this strategy is once people can visualize what they need to change, they become a little bit more accepting of it. But more importantly, they're the ones who are actually driving the change by answering these questions. Now this is going to seem very simple. Acknowledge through communication. So one of the things I want you to think about is how do I get them talking positively about each other? So for example, let's say we have a staff and we have John and Susie, and a question's asked and Susie offers a suggestion. Instead of asking the rhetorical, what do you think about that? You could turn to somebody and say, John, what do you like about Susie's idea? So when you use what is called a self-actualized question, which is a what question plus a success imperative, now Susie's going to hear something favorable about her by her teammate John. Number 2, use verbiage and signage. Put a sticky note on somebody's desk. You're doing an awesome job. Send a card to one of your teammates or to one of your employees saying, just wanted to let you know how much I enjoy working with you. I really appreciate your cooperation. See, we cannot repeat. We cannot get better at what we don't acknowledge. And if we do that through verbal and even nonverbal communication, your team will strengthen every single day. 1, get them talking about each other positively. 2, put some anonymous sticky notes on their workstations when they're not there. Number 3, hand out some cards that people can write notes to one another. There's nothing more powerful than going home and having a card from your boss next to the phone bill, the electric bill, the gas bill, and some marketing materials written on a powder blue envelope. Which one would you open first? And when you do that, you're solidifying and strengthening the team every single time you do that. Now, if you can actually acknowledge through communication the specific things from the first 2 strategies, the definitions of expectations, you will accelerate great teamwork. So we teach something in progress coaching called the conversation model. And in this case, we're talking about being a great teammate. We've got our definitions, we've got our actions. So what you can do is ask each and every one of your employees to come in to the staff meeting or your group coaching session and share as a learning project one thing a teammate did that you would like to acknowledge that was very positive from a teamwork and a cooperation perspective. And then you go around the room. A discussion ensues. You can certainly have an activity, but end that segment with another learning project. The learning projects breed ownership and accountability and the transference from that session back to their jobs. See, we as leaders cannot own what they choose not to own. And what happens in this conversation model by subscribing a learning project, we facilitate the constant choice of owning it. When you are coaching, I would encourage you to use the following 5 words, especially when it comes to being a better teammate or coaching or facilitating better teamwork. We, share, opportunity, perspective, and observation. So let's say we have a team of 10 people, and for the most part, 8 or 9 people are acting pretty cooperative. But Bob, for whatever reason, he's kind of the elephant in the room. He's not really in congruence with everybody. But you know, if you don't turn Bob in the right direction, he has the power to erode the fiber of the team. So one of the healthiest things we can do is to sit down with somebody like Bob and say, you know, Bob, I think we have an awesome opportunity to turn things in a direction to really strengthen the team even further. And I would love to share with you some of those perspectives specific to you, if that would be okay with you. Now at the end, I use something called a permission-based question. But notice, I'm in it with you, Bob. Share, it's a friendly way to give you a perspective. The opportunity for him is the WIFT, what's in it for him. Now, when you're working with your team, there's going to be other areas that you're developing. And one of the most powerful but also destructive things managers can do is use feedback. The reason people hate to role play and practice is because the feedback is always delivered in the form of the following. Well, that was pretty good, but if I were you, I would have, and then they unload 10 things they should have done better. So when you're facilitating practice or discussions, use what we call a feedback progression to strengthen the team. The first progression is, what is one thing your partner did well? What's one thing you felt you did well? What are 2 things you have done well to your pleasant surprise? Where do you feel your partner has an opportunity to improve? So if you notice, the first 3 sets of feedback, no matter the activity, they're positive. And number 4, remember those 5 words? It's not what they're doing wrong, it's their opportunity to improve. So when you use feedback, my suggestion is have 3 doses of positive feedback and then start to use some constructive feedback delivered in the diction and the verbiage of the opportunity to improve. So one of the healthiest things we can do when strengthening the team is to use something called journal-based coaching. Have every employee receive a journal or a notebook and write down on a daily basis maybe one success, one challenge they had, maybe a question they'd like to ask, and maybe one positive observation of a teammate they'd like to share with you as the manager or maybe the group in a group coaching activity. When people journal, they have a repository of what to share. Now the second thing you can do is to use books. One of my favorite books that goes to the element of being a great teammate is a book by John Cotter from Harvard, Our Iceberg is Melting. It's a fable, a story about a penguin community where the iceberg is truly melting. And it talks about how people communicate and how they trust each other or don't trust each other. But it really goes to the fiber of teamwork. So one of the healthiest things you can do is use books, but have people share what they've learned from the book or maybe what they've learned per chapter. So when you're coaching great teamwork, you've got 3 strategies: define and coach, whiteboard coaching, strategic acknowledgement and communication strategies. That's what will strengthen the team. Now on the next slide, we're going to give you our contact information if you'd like to reach out. And if you have any questions, please please let us know. Thanks for your time. Here's our contact information, tim@progresscoachingleader.com. And here are our 2 telephone numbers if you'd like to reach out if you have questions on this program or other suggestions around coaching great teamwork, please let us know.